There are moments in a marriage when trust, the foundation upon which everything else is built, cracks in a way that cannot be ignored or explained away or smoothed over with apologies and promises. Moments when what you see with your own eyes collides with what you thought you knew about the person sleeping beside you every night, and the collision is so devastating that everything after that moment is divided into before and after. When 39-year-old Jennifer Matthews walked onto the Family Feud stage in May 2025, excited to celebrate her 15th wedding anniversary with her husband David, she had no idea that within minutes she would witness something that would shatter her understanding of the man she married. Something so shocking and so public that Harvey himself would stop the entire show and force a reckoning that neither of them was prepared for. What happened next would prove that the most dangerous secrets in a marriage are not always the ones that involve betrayal, but sometimes the ones that involve sacrifice that was never asked for and loyalty that was never shared. Before we dive into this story of hidden truth, painful discovery, and the moment a family had to decide whether 15 years of marriage was strong enough to survive what had been kept in the dark, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Because what you are about to witness will remind you that sometimes the worst lies are the ones we tell ourselves about why we are keeping secrets from the people who love us most. The Family Feud studio that Thursday afternoon was buzzing with the particular energy that comes with anniversary episodes. The Matthews family had traveled from Charlotte, North Carolina, specifically for this taping, a surprise that David had arranged months earlier as a gift to Jennifer for their 15th anniversary. On paper, it was a romantic gesture, the kind of thing that husbands do when they are trying to show their wives that they still care, that the years have not dulled the effort, that love still means something tangible and deliberate. Jennifer Matthews stood at the front of her team with the nervous excitement of someone who had never been on television before. At 39, she was petite and bright-eyed, with the kind of careful, put-together appearance of a woman who had spent the morning getting ready for something important. She wore a dress that was new, bought specifically for this occasion, and her smile was genuine and unguarded in the way that smiles are when nothing has gone wrong yet. Beside her stood her husband David, 41 years old, tall and solid with the kind of face that photographed well, the kind of face that suggested reliability and steadiness, and all the qualities that make for a good husband and father. He had his arm around Jennifer's waist in that practiced, comfortable way that couples develop after 15 years together, and he was smiling. But there was something in the smile that did not quite reach his eyes, something held back, something careful. Completing their team were Jennifer's sister Melissa, her brother-in-law Tom, and David's cousin Eric. They were a good team on paper, close-knit and comfortable with each other, the kind of family unit that made for entertaining television because their dynamics were real and unforced. On the other side of the stage stood the Johnson family from Detroit, a loud and chaotic group that provided the perfect contrast to the Matthews family's more subdued energy. They were ready to play, ready to compete, ready to make noise and have fun. Harvey walked onto the stage with his characteristic energy, greeting both families, making jokes, getting the audience warmed up. He stopped in front of Jennifer and David with a warm smile that suggested he genuinely enjoyed these anniversary episodes, these celebrations of marriages that had lasted, that had made it through the hard years and come out the other side still intact. Jennifer and David Matthews, Steve said, his voice carrying that blend of warmth and showmanship that he had perfected over decades. 15 years of marriage, how does it feel? Jennifer beamed. It feels amazing, Steve. David is my best friend, my partner, the father of my 2 children. I could not imagine my life without him. David pulled her closer and kissed the top of her head. She is everything to me, he said, and the words sounded sincere, sounded real, sounded like the kind of thing a man says when he means it. Steve nodded approvingly. That is what I like to hear. Love, commitment, family, that is what we are celebrating today. The game started normally. Survey questions, shouted answers, the Johnson family celebrating with theatrical energy every time they scored points. The Matthews family played well, with Jennifer and David working together smoothly, finishing each other's sentences, laughing at the same moments, displaying the kind of synchronized rhythm that 15 years of marriage creates. Then, halfway through the second round, something happened that nobody had planned for. The question on the board read, "Things married couples keep secret from each other." It was designed to be lighthearted, the kind of question that would generate funny answers about hidden shopping trips or surprise birthday plans or guilty pleasure television shows. The Johnson family went first and gave answers that got big laughs. Secret dessert stashes, checking the phone in the bathroom, the audience loved it. Then it was the Matthews family's turn, and Steve turned to David. David, you have been married for 15 years. What do you think married couples keep secret from each other? And here is where everything changed. David opened his mouth to answer, and before he could speak, a woman's voice called out from the audience. Not a shout, not aggressive, just a voice clear and desperate and carrying the kind of emotion that cuts through noise and forces everyone to pay attention. David Matthews. Every head in the studio turned toward the voice. David's expression changed instantly. The careful smile disappeared. His face went pale. His hand, which had been resting on Jennifer's waist, dropped to his side. He turned toward the audience with the look of a man who had just seen something he had been dreading, something he had been trying to prevent, something that should not be here, should not be now, should not be happening in front of cameras and lights, and his wife of 15 years. Sitting in the third row of the audience was a woman. She was in her late 30s, thin to the point of frailty, with a scarf wrapped around her head in the way that women wear scarves when they have lost their hair to chemotherapy. Her face was gaunt, but her eyes were bright and fixed on David with an intensity that suggested she had not expected to see him here, had not planned this, had not known he would be on this show today. Steve Harvey had stopped mid-sentence. The entire studio had gone quiet. Jennifer was looking at the woman in the audience, then at her husband, then back at the woman, her expression cycling rapidly through confusion and concern and the first whispers of fear. I am sorry, the woman said, standing slowly, unsteadily, one hand on the seat in front of her for support. I did not mean to interrupt. I could not believe it when I saw you standing there. I did not know you would be here. David was frozen. He was staring at the woman with an expression that was part panic and part something else, something that looked like grief or guilt, or both tangled together, in a way that made it impossible to separate one from the other. Jennifer's voice, when it came, was quiet but edged with something sharp. David. Who is that? Steve Harvey, who had spent decades navigating unexpected moments on live television, stepped forward with his hands raised in a gesture that was equal parts calming and authoritative. Okay, hold on. Everybody hold on for a second. Ma'am, I am going to ask you to please sit down. And David, I am going to ask you to tell me what is going on here, right now, because your wife deserves to know. David looked at Steve, then at Jennifer, then at the woman in the audience who had sat back down but was still watching him with those bright, desperate eyes. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. That is Sarah Kendrick. She is the widow of my best friend Michael. Jennifer's eyes widened. Michael Kendrick, the Michael who died 3 years ago. Yes. Why is she here? Why is she looking at you like that? David's jaw worked. He was struggling with something, some decision that had to be made right here, right now, with no time to think and no way to control what happened next. Because I have been helping her, for the last 2 years, since she got sick. The word sick landed in the silence like a stone. Jennifer looked at the woman, really looked at her for the first time, and saw what everyone else in the studio had already seen. The scarf, the thinness, the pallor, the unmistakable signs of someone fighting a battle with cancer. You have been helping her, Jennifer repeated slowly. For 2 years, and you never told me. I did not want to burden you. Burden me? David, she is your best friend's widow. Why would helping her be a burden to me? David looked at the floor. Because you told me to stay away from them. After Michael died. You told me that his family was too much, that Sarah was too needy, that I was spending too much time trying to fix their problems and not enough time with our own family. You told me you did not want me involved with them anymore. Jennifer's face went through a series of rapid changes. Confusion, recognition, denial, then something that looked like pain. That was 3 years ago, David. Right after Michael died. Sarah was calling you at all hours. She was asking you to help with everything. Fix her car, deal with the insurance, handle Michael's estate. You were over there every weekend. I was trying to protect our marriage. I was trying to make sure we did not get swallowed up by someone else's grief. I know, and I listened to you. I stepped back. But then a year later, Sarah got diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And she has no one, no family. Michael's parents are dead. Her parents are not in the picture. She has no siblings. She was facing this alone. So you decided to help her, without telling me. Yes. The studio was holding its breath. Steve Harvey was standing between David and Jennifer, watching both of them, reading the room with the precision of someone who understood that what was happening was not simple, was not easy, was not the kind of thing that could be resolved with a joke or a game show moment. Jennifer's voice, when she spoke again, was shaking. What kind of help, David? What exactly have you been doing for 2 years that you could not tell your wife about? David met her eyes for the first time. I drive her to her chemotherapy appointments every Tuesday and Thursday for the last 18 months. I sit with her while she gets the treatments because she should not have to sit there alone. I bring her groceries because she is too weak some days to go to the store herself. I pay her mortgage because the medical bills have drained everything Michael left her, and she is going to lose the house if someone does not help. Jennifer stepped back as if she had been physically struck. You have been paying her mortgage with our money for how long? 14 months. 14 months, that is over a year. That is, David, how much? $1,200 a month. Jennifer did the math in her head, and the number hit her visibly. Over $16,000. $16,000 that had come out of their family's finances without her knowledge. $16,000 that could have gone to their children's college fund, or their own mortgage, or the vacation they had been planning. $16,000 that her husband had been giving to another woman without telling her. And the chemotherapy appointments, Jennifer said, her voice tight and controlled in the way voices get when emotion is too large to express without breaking completely. Every Tuesday and Thursday. That is twice a week, for 18 months, that is, what, over 100 appointments? I did not count. I did. You have been with her over 100 times in the last year and a half, and you told me you were working late. You told me you had meetings. You told me you had a project that required extra hours. You lied to me. For 18 months, you looked me in the eye and you lied. I did not lie about the other woman, David said, and there was desperation in his voice now. This is not an affair, Jennifer. I am not sleeping with her. I am not in love with her. I am helping her because she is dying and she has no one else, and she was my best friend's wife, and I owe Michael that much. You owe Michael, Jennifer repeated. What about what you owe me? What about the vow you made to me to be honest, to not keep secrets? What about the trust that a marriage requires, David? You destroyed that. You destroyed it every single time you lied about where you were. Every single time you chose her over the truth. Steve Harvey stepped forward. His voice was gentle but firm. I am going to stop both of you right here, because what is happening right now is important and it deserves to be handled with care. Jennifer, I hear you. You feel betrayed. You feel lied to, and you have every right to feel that way. David kept a massive secret from you for 2 years. That is a violation of trust. He turned to David. And David, I hear you too. You were trying to help someone who needed help. Someone who was your best friend's widow and who was facing cancer alone. That is a noble thing, but you went about it in the worst possible way. You lied to your wife. You took money from your family. You made unilateral decisions that affected your marriage without giving Jennifer a voice. Steve looked at both of them. But before we go any further, I want to bring someone else into this conversation. Because she is sitting in the audience, and she is part of this story whether she wanted to be or not. He gestured to Sarah Kendrick, who was still sitting in the third row, tears streaming down her face. Sarah, I am going to ask you to come up here, because if we are going to talk about this, we need to hear from you too. Sarah stood slowly, carefully, and made her way to the stage with the unsteady gait of someone whose body was fighting a war. When she reached the stage, David instinctively moved toward her, his hand reaching out to steady her. And that is when Jennifer saw it. David took Sarah's hand, not romantically, not intimately, but with the kind of care and familiarity that comes from having held that hand many times before, in waiting rooms, in treatment centers, in moments of fear and pain and the desperate need for human connection. Jennifer's face crumpled. Because actually seeing her husband hold another woman's hand with that much gentleness and that much familiarity made it real in a way that words had not. How long have you been holding her hand? Jennifer whispered. David looked down at his hand in Sarah's and did not let go. Since the first chemotherapy session. She was terrified, she was shaking, and I held her hand, and I have held it ever since. Every treatment, every scan, every moment she needed someone to hold on to. Sarah spoke for the first time since coming onto the stage. Her voice was weak but clear. Mrs. Matthews, I did not know he was keeping this from you. I swear to you I did not know. David told me that you knew, that you had given him permission to help me, that you were okay with it. Jennifer turned to David with an expression of betrayal so complete that it was painful to witness. You told her I knew, you made me complicit in your lie. You made it seem like I was okay with you spending hundreds of hours with another woman and thousands of dollars on her bills. You made me the villain in this story without even telling me the story existed. David's composure finally broke. I did not know what else to do. You told me to stay away from Sarah. You made it very clear 3 years ago that you did not want me involved with Michael's family. But when Sarah got sick, I could not just abandon her. Michael was my best friend. He saved my life once, literally saved my life when we were in college and I was in a car accident and he pulled me out before it caught fire. I owe him everything. And when his wife got cancer and had no one, how could I just walk away? You could have talked to me. Jennifer's voice finally broke, the control shattering into raw emotion. You could have sat me down and said Sarah is sick and I want to help her and here is what that looks like. You could have given me a choice. You could have respected me enough to have an honest conversation. But instead, you decided for both of us. You decided that lying was easier than trusting me with the truth. Steve Harvey, who had been listening to all of this with the focused attention of someone who understood the weight of what was being said, spoke quietly. David, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about the answer. Why did you think Jennifer would say no if you asked her? David was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. Because 3 years ago she did say no. She told me I was too involved, that I was neglecting our family, that Sarah needed to figure things out on her own, and she was not wrong. I was spending too much time over there. I was trying to fix everything for Sarah because I could not fix the fact that Michael was dead. Jennifer was right to call me out on that. He paused, gathering himself. But when Sarah got sick, I convinced myself that if I asked Jennifer again, she would say the same thing, that she would tell me no, and I could not accept that answer, so I just did not ask. I told myself I was protecting Jennifer from having to make a hard choice. But really, I was protecting myself from hearing no. Jennifer was crying now, openly and without trying to hide it. You did not give me a chance to be the person I am now, David. You judged me based on who I was 3 years ago in a completely different situation. 3 years ago, you were drowning in someone else's grief, and it was affecting our marriage. That is not the same as someone having cancer and needing help. Those are two completely different things, and you never gave me the opportunity to make that distinction. Sarah, who had been standing quietly beside David, spoke again. Mrs. Matthews, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that I became a secret in your marriage. I never wanted that. If I had known, I would have told David to talk to you. I would have insisted on it, because you deserve to know what your husband is doing. You deserve to have a voice in decisions that affect your family. She pulled her hand away from David's and stepped toward Jennifer. Your husband has been extraordinary. He has sat with me through some of the worst days of my life. He has held my hand while poison was pumped into my veins. He has listened to me cry about losing Michael and about being scared that I am going to die before I get to see my nieces grow up. He has been the only constant in a nightmare that has lasted 2 years. Sarah's voice broke. But he should not have done it at the cost of his marriage. He should not have lied to you. Because what he gave me, this gift of not being alone, it is not worth destroying what you two have. It is not worth the pain I see on your face right now. Jennifer looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and something shifted in her expression. The anger was still there. The betrayal was still there. But underneath it, fighting its way to the surface, was something else. Something that looked like recognition. Because Jennifer Matthews was not a cruel person. She was not a person who would have said no to helping someone with cancer. She was a person who had been protecting her marriage 3 years ago from a situation that felt unsustainable. And her husband had never trusted her enough to understand that distinction. Steve Harvey let the moment breathe before speaking. Here is what I see happening. I see a man who made a terrible choice for what he thought was a good reason. I see a wife who was kept in the dark about something that fundamentally affected her marriage and her finances and her trust. And I see a woman who is fighting for her life, and who, through no fault of her own, became a secret that poisoned a marriage. He looked at David. David, you did a good thing in the worst possible way. Helping Sarah was the right impulse. Lying to Jennifer was the wrong execution. And the lie, that is what is killing your marriage right now. Not Sarah, not the chemotherapy appointments, not even the money, the lie. The choice you made every single day for 2 years to keep this from the woman you promised to be honest with. He turned to Jennifer. Jennifer, you have every right to be angry, every right to feel betrayed. But I also want you to ask yourself a hard question. If David had come to you 2 years ago and told you about Sarah's cancer and asked to help her, what would you have said? Jennifer wiped her eyes. Her voice was quiet. I do not know. I want to believe I would have said yes. I want to believe I would have been compassionate and understanding. But honestly, Steve, I do not know. Because 3 years ago, I was tired of everything in our life revolving around Michael's family. I was tired of being second place. And maybe I would have said no, maybe I would have drawn a line and told David he had already given enough. She looked at her husband. But David did not give me that chance. He did not trust me enough to even ask. He decided that he knew what I would say and he acted accordingly. And that is what I am struggling with, not that he helped Sarah, but that he did not believe in me enough to include me in the decision. Steve nodded slowly. So the question now is, where do you go from here? Because this marriage is standing on a knife's edge. The trust is broken. The secrets are out. And you two have to decide if 15 years and 2 children and whatever love is left is enough to rebuild from here. The conversation that followed was one of the most raw and honest discussions about marriage that had ever been broadcast on daytime television. Steve brought chairs onto the stage, and the three of them sat, David and Jennifer and Sarah, and they talked for over an hour about trust and lies, and the impossible choices that people make when they are trying to do right by everyone and end up doing right by no one. Jennifer asked Sarah about her cancer, about her prognosis, about what she was facing. Sarah told her that she was in remission now, that the chemotherapy had worked, that she had a chance at survival that she did not have 2 years ago. David saved my life, Sarah said simply, not just by driving me to appointments, but by making me believe that I was worth saving, that I was not alone, that someone cared if I lived or died. Jennifer asked David about the money, about how they had afforded it, about what he had sacrificed to pay Sarah's mortgage. David admitted that he had been taking extra freelance work, working nights and weekends to cover the $1,200 a month without touching their family savings. I was exhausted, he admitted. I was working 2 jobs and lying about both of them. I was drowning, but I did not know how to stop. And Jennifer finally admitted her own truth. 3 years ago, I was jealous, not of Sarah specifically, but of how much of you was going to Michael's family, of how much energy and time and emotion you were putting into their grief when I felt like you had none left for me. I wanted my husband back. I wanted to feel like I mattered as much as your loyalty to Michael. And maybe I made you feel like you could not help without betraying me. Maybe I created a situation where you felt like lying was your only option. Steve Harvey, listening to all of this, offered the perspective that only someone outside the marriage could offer. Here is what I know about marriage. It requires trust, but it also requires the courage to ask for what you need even when you are scared of the answer. David, you were scared Jennifer would say no, so you did not ask. Jennifer, you were scared that David would choose his loyalty to Michael over his commitment to you, so you drew a hard line 3 years ago, and both of you have been living with those fears instead of talking about them. Until now. Until this moment. Until everything broke open on national television and there was nowhere left to hide. The episode aired 3 weeks later, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. The clip of Jennifer seeing David hold Sarah's hand went viral, not because it was scandalous, but because it was heartbreaking. Because millions of people watching recognized the pain of discovering a secret in your marriage. The pain of realizing your partner did not trust you with the truth. The pain of understanding that good intentions and terrible choices can coexist in the same person, in the same marriage, in the same moment. Marriage counselors across the country referenced the episode as a case study in the difference between secrets and privacy, between protection and deception, between doing the right thing and doing the thing right. Therapists used it to talk about how unresolved conflict creates patterns that repeat, how Jennifer's boundary 3 years ago had become a wall that David could not cross even when circumstances changed, how David's choice to lie had confirmed Jennifer's worst fear that she was not his first priority. David and Jennifer Matthews went to counseling. Intensive, difficult, painful counseling that forced them to confront not just the lie but the reasons behind the lie. David had to learn how to ask for what he needed instead of making unilateral decisions. Jennifer had to learn how to hold boundaries without building walls. They had to rebuild trust from the ground up, one honest conversation at a time. Sarah Kendrick remained part of their lives, but in a different way. Jennifer reached out to her directly a week after the episode aired, and they met for coffee. It was awkward and painful and necessary. Sarah apologized for accepting David's help without questioning why Jennifer was not involved. Jennifer apologized for making Sarah feel like the enemy instead of recognizing her as a widow and a cancer patient who was just trying to survive. They did not become close friends, but they found a way to be in each other's lives that was honest and boundaried and sustainable. 5 years after the Family Feud episode aired, Jennifer and David Matthews renewed their vows in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. It was not a statement that everything was healed or that the betrayal was forgot. It was an acknowledgement that they had chosen to stay and to rebuild and to create something new from the ruins of what had been broken. Sarah attended the ceremony, healthy and in remission for 5 years, and when Jennifer saw her, she walked over and hugged her tightly. Because time and honesty, and the hard work of facing the truth, had transformed Sarah from a symbol of betrayal into something else entirely. A reminder that marriages are tested not by the easy choices, but by the impossible ones. That loyalty to the dead and commitment to the living can coexist if both partners are willing to talk about how. 10 years after that Thursday afternoon on the Family Feud stage, Jennifer Matthews spoke at a marriage retreat about secrets and trust, and the lies we tell ourselves about why we keep the truth from the people we love. She talked about seeing David hold Sarah's hand and feeling like her world was ending. She talked about learning the full story and realizing that betrayal is complicated, that her husband had lied to her, and also that his heart had been in the right place even if his execution had been disastrous. "I spent 2 years believing my marriage was solid," Jennifer told the room. "And then I spent 5 minutes believing it was destroyed. And then I spent 5 years rebuilding it into something stronger than it had ever been. Because the secret was not the thing that almost destroyed us. The unwillingness to have hard conversations, that is what almost destroyed us. David was afraid to ask, I was afraid to soften, and we almost lost everything because both of us were operating from fear instead of trust." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was clear and certain. "Steve Harvey asked me on that stage if I would have said yes if David had asked me about helping Sarah. And the honest answer is I do not know. I want to believe I would have, but I cannot be sure. What I do know now is that I would rather have a hard conversation with my husband than live inside a lie. I would rather disagree and negotiate and find compromise than discover that we have been living in two different realities. Because trust is not about always agreeing. It is about always being honest enough to disagree out loud. If you have been moved by this story of secrets, sacrifice, and the hard work of rebuilding trust, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share this with someone who has kept a secret from their partner because they were afraid of the answer. Share this with someone who has discovered a lie and is trying to decide whether the marriage is worth saving. Remember that David Matthews was not a villain. He was a good man who made a terrible choice for what he thought was the right reason. And Jennifer Matthews was not cruel. She was a wife protecting her marriage, who inadvertently created a situation where her husband felt like he had to choose between his loyalty to the past and his commitment to the present. The tragedy is that he never had to choose. If he had just been brave enough to ask, if she had just been clear enough to explain that her boundary 3 years ago was about that specific situation, not about compassion in general. Both of them had trusted each other with the truth instead of protecting each other from hard conversations. Marriage is not destroyed by hard things. It is destroyed by the refusal to talk about hard things. David held Sarah Kendrick's hand through chemotherapy for 18 months, and he should have been holding Jennifer's hand while he told her what he was doing and why. That is the lesson. That is the truth that broke open on a game show stage and changed two lives forever. Trust your partner with the truth. Even when you are scared. Especially when you are scared. Because the lie, no matter how well-intentioned, will always be worse than the conversation you are afraid to have.